Emma Fletcher sat alone in her small flat in Oakford Village, staring at the eviction notice. 3 months behind on rent after losing her teaching job. The walls seemed to close in around her. At 42, starting over felt impossible. 2A. Morning light filtered through thin curtains, casting weak shadows across the simple living room. Empty teacups sat unwashed in the sink, bills piled high on the kitchen counter. Emma hadn't bothered opening most of them. What was the point? The eviction notice told her everything she needed to know. In 30 days she would have nowhere to live. 6 months ago, everything had been different. Westfield Primary School had been her home for 15 years. The children's laughter, their wide eyes when they understood something new, their small hands raised eagerly in the air. These things had given her life meaning. Then came the budget cuts. Last hired, first fired didn't apply to her. Instead it was most expensive. To keep, her experience, once valued, had become a liability. Emma pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The heating had been turned down for weeks to save money. Her savings, once carefully built for a rainy day, had dwindled to almost nothing. Job applications sat on her laptop, most unanswered. The few interviews she'd managed had all ended the same way. We're looking for someone with different qualifications. Different meant younger. Different meant cheaper. Rain began to tap against the window, matching the rhythm of her thoughts. What would she tell her sister in London? Or her elderly mother? They both thought she was doing fine. The shame of failure weighed on her chest like a stone. The sudden ring of her phone made her jump. Richard's name flashed on the screen. Her former colleague had been checking in regularly, despite her increasing reluctance to answer. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her pick up. "Emma, you sound terrible," Richard said. After her mumbled hello, "Just tired," she lied. "What's up?" "I've been thinking about you," Richard said, his voice warm with concern. "There's a temporary position at Westbridge Community Centre. They need someone for their literacy program. 3 months, maybe longer if they get the funding they're applying for." Emma's heart sank. The community centre was in the poorest part of town. The pay would be minimal. And temporary meant just that. A short delay before ending up exactly where she was now. "I don't know, Richard," Emma whispered. "I'm not sure I have anything left to give." "Just come see it," he urged gently. "The children there could use someone. Like you. Many of them are falling behind in school. No one at home to help them read, parents working multiple jobs. You always had a way with the struggling ones." Emma remembered Lily from her class 3 years ago. The girl hadn't spoken a word for weeks after losing her father. Emma had sat with her during lunch breaks, not pushing, just being there. The day Lily finally read aloud to the class had been one of Emma's proudest moments. "I'll think about it," she promised, though doubt weighed heavy in her heart. After hanging up, Emma looked around her flat. Photos on the wall showed happier times. Holidays with friends, her graduation day, standing proudly outside her classroom door on her first day at Westfield. When had she last felt that hopeful? The afternoon dragged on. Emma made tea she didn't drink. She tried to read but couldn't focus. The eviction notice seemed to grow larger every time she glanced at the kitchen table. As darkness fell, the rain grew heavier. Emma switched on a single lamp to save electricity. The soft light, barely, reached the corners of the room. She should make dinner, but her appetite had disappeared weeks ago. Instead, she found herself opening the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside was her old teaching journal, covered in dust. Emma hadn't been able to look at it since clearing out her classroom, but tonight she pulled it out and opened to a random page. Today, Jamie wrote his name for the first time without help. His smile lit up the room. Another page. "Mia brought me a daisy from the playground. Said it looked like it needed a friend just like she did last term. How far she's come." And another. End-of-year tests showed every child improved their reading level. Even Marcus, who struggled so much in September. His mother cried at parents. Evening. Page after page of small victories and bright moments. Children who had entered her classroom afraid or angry or lost, and who had left standing taller, smiling more, believing in themselves. Emma closed the journal, holding it against her chest. The teacher in those pages seemed like a stranger now, confident, purposeful, making a difference. Could she ever be that person again? The community centre wouldn't be like Westfield. The challenges would be greater, the resources fewer. But perhaps there was still a flicker of hope. Worth following. She had nothing left to lose. Tomorrow she would call Richard back. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but Emma felt something shift inside her. The tiniest spark of possibility where before there had been only darkness. The Westbridge Community Centre stood in the poorest part of town. Emma hesitated before entering, clutching her worn portfolio to her chest. The red brick building looked tired, with chipped steps leading to a heavy wooden door. A handwritten sign reading "Welcome All" hung slightly crooked in the window. Emma checked her watch, 20 minutes early. She had woken at dawn, trying on 3 different outfits before settling on her navy skirt and cream blouse. Professional, but not too formal. Her teaching clothes. The familiar fabric felt like both armor and deception. Was she really a teacher anymore? A young man pushed past her into the building, nodding politely. Emma took a deep breath and followed him inside. The smell hit her first. Floor polish, paper glue, and something cooking. School smells, but homier. Inside, peeling paint and mismatched furniture told the story of limited resources. Plastic chairs in different colors surrounded tables that didn't quite match. A water stain spread across one ceiling corner. But the walls were covered with colorful artwork and hopeful messages. Dream big. You matter. Today is a new start. Children's paintings showed houses, families, and impossibly blue skies. Emma stood awkwardly in the entrance hall, uncertain where to go. A door opened, and a woman with silver-streaked hair appeared. She wore jeans and a bright green cardigan, reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. "You must be Emma," she said, her voice warm and rich. She extended her hand. "I'm Dorothy. Richard has told me wonderful things about you." Emma shook her hand, surprised by the firm grip. "Thank you for seeing me. Of course, we've been hoping to expand our reading program for months. Richard says you worked wonders with struggling readers at Westfield." Emma forced a smile. Richard had always been too kind, too generous with his praise. "I'm not sure I'm what you need." Dorothy studied. Her face, 15 years teaching experience, multiple literacy training certificates. "I think you're exactly what we need." "I meant—" Emma hesitated. How could she explain that the confident teacher Richard described felt like a stranger now? That the woman standing here felt hollow, used up? "Why don't you see for yourself?" Dorothy said gently, as if reading her thoughts. She gestured down the hallway. "The children will be here for another hour." Dorothy led her past several rooms. A small kitchen where volunteers prepared snacks, an art room with half-finished projects drying on tables, a computer lab with outdated machines. Finally, they stopped at a classroom at the end of the hall. Through the window in the door, Emma could see 8 children sitting around a circular table. Ages 7 to 10, she guessed. A teenage volunteer was trying to help them, looking overwhelmed as she moved between children, raising their hands. "This is our after-school program," Dorothy explained as they entered. "Most of these children struggle with reading. Their parents work multiple jobs. They have no one to read with them at home." The children looked up curiously as Emma and Dorothy entered. The teenage volunteer gave Dorothy a grateful look. "Everyone, this is Ms. Fletcher. She's a teacher who's come to visit us today," Dorothy announced. Emma felt 8 pairs of eyes examining her. A girl with braids tied with yellow ribbons, 2 boys who looked like brothers, a tall girl chewing her pencil, and at the far end a small boy with serious eyes and a red sweater too big for his thin frame. "Are you our new teacher?" the boy in the red sweater asked. His voice was quiet but clear. "I'm just visiting today, love," Emma replied gently, the old term of endearment slipping out automatically. "I'm Oliver," he said. "I don't read good, but I try hard." Something stirred in Emma's heart, the first warm feeling she'd had in months. Not pity, but recognition. She remembered that determined look, the mixture of hope and fear. "Would you like me to read with you today, Oliver?" she heard herself ask. His face brightened. "Yes, please." Dorothy pulled out a chair for Emma. "I'll leave you to it. Come find me when you're finished." Emma sat down beside Oliver, who immediately pushed his book toward her. "It's about dinosaurs," he explained. "The T-Rex is my favorite because he's strong, but I can't read the big words." Emma looked at the book. It was at least 2 levels higher than Oliver could likely manage. "Why don't we read it together?" she suggested. For the next 45 minutes, Emma moved around the table, helping each child with their reading. The teenage volunteer, Jenny, worked alongside her, following Emma's approach. Emma found herself slipping into familiar patterns, using tricks and techniques that had once been second nature. Sound it out slowly. Cover the ending and look at the beginning. What would make sense in that sentence? She knelt beside Oliver's chair, watching as he struggled through a paragraph about prehistoric forests. His finger traced each word, his lips moving silently before speaking aloud. "The dinosaurs lived in forests," Emma supplied gently. "Forests with tall trees and lots of plants to eat." "Perfect. You're doing brilliantly, Oliver." He looked up at her, doubt in his eyes. "Really? My teacher at school says—" "I'm behind. She says I need to try harder." Emma felt a flash of anger at this unknown teacher. "Different people learn at different speeds," she said. "The important thing is that you keep trying, just like you're doing now." As the session ended and parents began arriving, Oliver lingered by Emma's side. "Will you come back tomorrow?" he asked. Before Emma could answer, a tired-looking woman in a supermarket uniform called from the doorway. "Oliver, come on. I've got to get to my next shift." "Coming, Mum." Oliver gathered his books. "Bye, Miss Fletcher," he said, then added in a whisper, "Please come back." Emma watched him go, feeling something she hadn't experienced in months. Purpose, not the grand purpose of shaping young minds that she'd once embraced, but something smaller and no less vital, helping one child sound out words about dinosaurs. Dorothy appeared at her side. "Well, what do you think?" Emma looked around the shabby classroom with its mismatched chairs and worn books. She thought of Oliver's serious eyes and his whispered plea. "When would you need me to start?" she asked. 2 weeks into volunteering, Emma received another notice: final eviction in 7 days. She sat on a bench outside the community center, trying to hide her tears. The bright red paper seemed to burn in her pocket. 7 days, 168 hours, until she had nowhere to live. The afternoon sun warmed the small garden area where Emma had retreated after her session, with the children. Usually she found peace here, watching butterflies visit the wildflowers planted by the center's gardening club. Today, the beauty only made her situation feel more painful. Emma had applied for 12 teaching positions in the past 2 weeks. 5 hadn't responded. 6 had sent polite rejections. 1 had offered an interview next month, far too late to help with her current crisis. Her volunteer work at the center had reawakened her love of teaching, but volunteer work didn't pay. Rent! She wiped her eyes quickly as she heard the center door open. The children were leaving, calling goodbye to each other as parents collected them. Emma waved to Jenny, the teenage helper who was heading home. She couldn't let anyone see how desperate things had become. "Miss Emma, are you sad?" Emma looked up, startled. Oliver stood before her, his serious eyes studying her face. He wore the same red sweater he always did, the sleeves rolled up several times to fit his small arms. "Just a bit tired, love," she lied, forcing a smile. Oliver didn't look convinced. He climbed onto the bench beside her, his feet dangling above the ground. "My gran says people cry when they're sad, not when they're tired." Emma couldn't help but smile at his directness. "Your gran sounds very wise." "She is," Oliver nodded, solemnly. "When I'm sad, my gran says to name 3 good things." He counted on his fingers. "Today you helped me read a whole page. That's one good thing." Despite everything, Emma smiled genuinely this time. "You're right, that is a good thing. And," Oliver continued, raising a second finger, "my mum packed me an extra biscuit today. I saved half for you." He pulled her slightly. Squashed chocolate digestive wrapped in a napkin from his pocket. Emma took the offering, touched beyond words. "Thank you, Oliver. That's 2 good things." He thought hard, then brightened. "And Mrs. Dorothy said you might stay and be our real Teacher, that's 3. Emma's heart sank. Dorothy had mentioned trying to find funds for a part-time position, but nothing had come of it. Still, she couldn't bear to disappoint the hopeful face beside her. Those are 3 very good things, she agreed, carefully eating the biscuit. You've made me feel much better. Oliver beamed with pride. The center door opened again and his mother appeared, looking harried as usual. Oliver, come on, I've been calling you. Coming, Mum. Oliver jumped down. Remember the 3 good things, Miss Emma, he whispered, before running off. Emma watched him go, the sweetness of the chocolate mingling with the bitterness of her situation. 3 good things. She had helped Oliver read. She had made a difference today. But in a week, she might be sleeping on her sister's sofa in London, far from Oakford and these children who were just starting to trust her. Later, Dorothy found Emma organizing books in the small library area. The older woman's face looked tired, but kind as always. You were wonderful with Oliver today, she said. That boy has been through so much since his father left. The children adore you. I wish we could offer you a proper position. Emma paused, a book about space exploration in her hands. She thought of Oliver counting good things on his small fingers, of the red eviction notice in her pocket, of the spark of purpose she'd felt these past 2 weeks. I've been thinking about that, Emma said slowly. What if we applied for a grant? The Regional Education Trust has a program for literacy projects in underserved communities. I've written proposals before back at Westfield. Dorothy's expression turned sad. We've tried. Applying for grants, she sighed. 3 times last year. Never successful. The forms are complicated and none of us have experience with that sort of writing. Let me help, Emma insisted, a spark of her old confidence returning. These children deserve more. And honestly, so do you and all the volunteers who keep this place running. Dorothy looked surprised by Emma's sudden passion. You really think we could get funding? I do, Emma said, surprising herself with her certainty. The work being done here is exactly what these grant programs are meant to support. We just need to tell your story effectively. For the first time, Emma saw hope light Dorothy's tired eyes. Well, I suppose there's no harm in trying one more time. When could you start working on it? Tonight, Emma said firmly. The deadline is in 5 days. We'll need to work quickly. That night, in her flat surrounded by boxes she'd already started packing, Emma began writing, her laptop balanced on her knees, surrounded by notes from her conversation with Dorothy about the center's history, programs, and needs. The eviction. Notice lay on the table, but Emma barely glanced at it. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she crafted the narrative of the community center, its struggles, its small victories, its vital importance to children like Oliver. She wrote about parents working multiple jobs, about children falling behind in school, about the difference that consistent, quality after-school support could make. For the first time in months, Emma worked with purpose, forgetting her own troubles. As she focused on possibilities instead of problems, the budget section was challenging. Dorothy had provided basic numbers, but Emma needed to create a compelling case for how additional funding would be used. At midnight, Emma finally stopped writing. Her eyes burned with fatigue, but her mind felt alive with ideas. She had forgotten this feeling, the satisfaction of using her skills for something meaningful. Whether the grant was approved or not, tonight she had remembered who she was. Not just a teacher, but a fighter. Someone who believed change was possible. Tomorrow she would take the draft to Dorothy. Together they would refine it, gather the supporting documents, and submit it before the deadline. It was a long shot, but it was also a lifeline. Not just for the community center, but for Emma herself. As she finally prepared for bed, Emma found herself counting on her fingers, just as Oliver had taught her. 1. She had written 5 solid pages of the grant proposal. 2. Oliver had read a whole page today. 3. For the first time since losing her job, she had hope. They approved it, Dorothy exclaimed, waving the letter. The Regional Education Trust granted us funding for 2 years. Emma stood frozen in the doorway of the small staff room. For a moment she thought she had misheard. 6 weeks had passed since they submitted the grant application. 6 weeks of checking emails hourly, Of Dorothy calling the Trust's office for updates, of trying not to hope too much. The small staff room erupted in cheers. Jenny, the teenage volunteer, clapped her hands. Mr. Peters, the elderly math tutor, pumped his fist in the air. 2 other volunteers hugged each other. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. Happy tears for once. "Let me see," Emma whispered, her hand trembling as Dorothy passed her the letter. The official letterhead of the Regional Education Trust seemed to shine under the fluorescent lights. Emma scanned the text, barely able to believe the words. Not only had they approved the grant, but they had funded the full amount. Enough for new books, learning materials, proper training for volunteers, and 2 full-time staff positions. "This means we can hire you properly," Dorothy continued. Her face flushed with excitement. "Full salary, benefits, what do you say?" Emma's voice caught in her throat. Just 3 days remained before she had to leave her flat. 3 days before she would have to call her sister and ask for that sofa in London. She had been packing boxes in the evenings, trying to decide which of her belongings to keep and which to sell. "I'd be honored," she managed, her voice barely audible over the continuing celebrations. Mr. Peters opened a bottle of sparkling apple juice he had been saving for his birthday. Plastic cups were distributed. Toasts were made. Emma found herself swept up in the joy of the moment, laughing. As Jenny described how they would tell the children tomorrow, "Oliver will be so excited," Jenny said. "He asks every day if Miss Fletcher is staying forever." Forever. The word echoed in Emma's mind. She still had nowhere to live in 3 days. The job was wonderful, life-changing even, but it wouldn't solve her immediate housing crisis. Rents in Oakford had risen sharply in recent years. Even with a steady salary, finding an affordable place on short notice would be nearly impossible. After everyone left, Emma stayed behind to help Dorothy clear up the plastic cups and napkins. Her hands worked automatically while her mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps a hotel for a few nights, but that would quickly eat into her savings, which were already dangerously low. "You're quiet," Dorothy remarked, studying Emma's face. "Is everything all right? I thought you'd be over the moon." Emma hesitated. Pride had kept her silent about her situation for months. But Dorothy had shown nothing but kindness, and now they would be colleagues, properly. "I am thrilled about the job," Emma confessed. "It's just I'm being evicted from my flat. I have to be out in 3 days and I haven't found anywhere else to live." Dorothy's eyes widened. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Emma looked away. "I didn't want anyone to know how bad things had gotten. I was hoping to find a place before it became an issue." Dorothy was silent for a moment, thinking. "My brother, William has a cottage he rents out," she said finally. "The last tenants moved out a month ago. It needs some work, but the rent is fair. Let me call him." Before Emma could protest, Dorothy had pulled out her phone. Emma listened as she explained the situation to her brother. "Yes, she's the one who wrote that grant application. Very reliable. Starting immediately at the center." Dorothy winked at Emma. "Tomorrow afternoon? Perfect. We'll meet you there." 2 days later, Emma stood in a small stone cottage on the edge of Oakford. Sunlight streamed through slightly dusty windows, illuminating wooden floors that needed polishing and walls that needed fresh paint. But the cottage had solid bones: a working fireplace, a spacious kitchen with an old but functional stove, and 2 bedrooms upstairs with views of the surrounding fields. It was modest but charming, with a tiny garden out back where wildflowers grew between flagstones. A far cry from her modern flat in town, but somehow more like a home already. The previous tenants let it get a bit run down, William explained apologetically. He was a kind-faced man in his 60s, with the same crinkly smile as his sister. "I was planning to fix it up before renting it again, but if you don't mind a project..." "It's perfect," Emma told him honestly. Then reality intruded. "But I can only afford half this rent until I get my first proper paycheck. And even then..." William waved a hand dismissively. "Dorothy told me what you've done for the center. That grant will help dozens of children for years to come. How about you pay what you can now, and we'll sort the rest later. Good neighbors matter more than money." Emma stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," William nodded firmly. "And if you're handy with a paintbrush, we can work out a discount for improvements you make. Dorothy tells me you're good with the children, but she didn't mention if you're good with DIY. Emma laughed. I helped my dad renovate our family home growing up. I can paint, put up shelves, even do basic plumbing. Perfect. Then it's settled. William handed her a set of old-fashioned iron keys. Welcome home, Emma. Later that evening, Emma sat on the worn stone step at the back door of the cottage, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. A cup of tea steamed beside her. Tomorrow she would start moving her boxes. Tomorrow afternoon, she would begin her new job, officially, with a contract and everything. For the first time in months, Emma felt the crushing weight begin to lift. The cottage needed work, yes. Her new job would be challenging. Nothing was perfect or certain. But she had a roof over her head, work that mattered, and people who believed in her. As darkness fell, Emma noticed a small bird's nest tucked under the eaves of the cottage roof. New life, making a home in an unexpected place. She smiled at the parallel. Perhaps they would rebuild together. Emma stood at the front of the room, her hands gripping the edge of the podium. The community center's main hall was filled with people, parents, children, volunteers, all gathered to celebrate the progress of the literacy program. The space looked transformed, with fresh paint on the walls and shelves full of books lining one side. 6 months ago, this had been a nearly abandoned building. Now it felt alive. When I came here, Emma began, her voice steady but soft, I had lost everything. My job, my home, and most of all, my belief in myself. She glanced at the faces in the crowd. There was Dorothy, who had started volunteering after retirement, William and Richard, 2 university students who had become regular helpers. And the children, so many eager, smiling faces. Among them was Oliver, who had once struggled to read even simple sentences, but now sat confidently in the front row. Emma's eyes lingered on Oliver. What I found here wasn't just employment, she continued. I found purpose again. I found a community. Oliver raised his hand, waving it eagerly. Emma paused, smiling warmly. Yes, Oliver. Can I read the thing I wrote? He asked, holding up a piece of paper. His voice was both nervous and excited. Of course, Emma said, stepping back, to give him the stage. Oliver stood up, the paper trembling slightly in his small hands. He took a deep breath and began to read. Before Miss Emma came, words were just marks I couldn't understand. They didn't mean anything to me. But now, they're stories and adventures and knowledge. She never gave up on me, even when I wanted to give up on myself. The room fell silent, and then applause broke out. Emma felt her chest tighten with emotion. She clapped along with everyone else, her pride in Oliver shining through her smile. After the event ended, Emma walked home. The air was crisp, and the scent of spring flowers drifted through the breeze. Her small cottage came into view, its garden blooming with colorful blossoms she had planted herself. 6 months ago, this cottage had felt empty and cold. Now it felt like a sanctuary. Emma paused at the gate, looking at the life she had rebuilt. Helping the children learn to read had given her a sense of purpose she never expected to find again. She realized that in helping them rebuild their futures, she had also rebuilt her own. That evening, after a simple dinner, Emma sat at her desk and opened a fresh journal. She stared at the blank page for a moment before picking up her pen. Slowly, she wrote the first words, "Today I am home,"